Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2013's Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, a game of transition for the annual franchise, both in console generations and the in-game modern-day narrative, spun in a Caribbean pirating web.
Following that is a mystery aboard a ship where everybody is long dead or gone, and you have to figure out how and why it all happened in one of the most unique puzzle games in recent history, 2018's Return of the Obra Dinn.
Boats, ships, sailing away. Not necessarily adventure, either adventure you're currently going on or what the heck happened. It's definitely a boat-themed episode this week.
Yeah, this, originally I was going to do Obra Dinn months ago. When you did Okami, I was like trying to think, what's a game with a really interesting art style that I could put alongside Okami? And Obra Dinn was the first game to come to mind.
Sure.
But I hadn't played it yet. And so I kind of just thought like, I'd rather play it first. And now I did. I actually played it months ago. Like back in January or something. But I am here now and ready to talk about it. And also, I've heard great things about the soundtrack of Black Flag, and I'm very interested to learn about it.
Yeah, I figured that was a perfect pairing if we're talking about games where ships take a prominent featuring role. But Joe, what other games have you been playing this past week?
Not a lot, actually, to be honest. I played a little bit of Burnout Paradise Remastered on Switch for a review, which that review still has to get out. Oh boy. It's a good port. Like a solid port, honestly. But other than that, like, I kept wanting to go back and play some Tatsunoko vs. Capcom after last week's episode. I just never really got around to doing it. And I've been watching my roommate play Last of Us Part 2, and that's really all that's been happening in terms of video games on my end.
Okay, so I have to ask how far he is, because Last of Us Part 2 has been my video game week. So I'll have to ask how far along is Ben and your subsequent watching.
I believe he is in Seattle day 2.
Okay.
He just met the person that's in Seattle.
Yes.
And brought them back to the place. That's the last thing that happened before we stopped for the night.
Okay. Very interesting. I am in chapter 6 of what is supposedly 11, if an IGN guide is to be believed. I am in the middle of the chapter of what happens after Seattle day 3. So I am 14 hours in, thoroughly enjoying the game so far. It is everything that I wanted a sequel of The Last of Us to be so far. We'll see how the second half of the story unfolds, but I've got a feeling that a lot of the complaints are going to be vocal minority and very much unfounded as far as my opinions of how the game's going to shake out.
Potentially. I know Ben has reservations about it. He's having fun playing the game. Like, he's having a good time playing outside of a few issues where, like, he threw a Molotov and everybody was set on fire and then nobody died. It was super weird. But, like, he's at least having fun.
Yeah, maybe that depends on the difficulty. I cranked mine way down and thoroughly enjoying it. Really love Naughty Dog games. But no follow-up headlines this week. Let's go right into our first game this week, and let's talk about Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. We've talked about Assassin's Creed games before on this show. I have. It's a series that is very near and dear to my heart. We talked about Assassin's Creed Syndicate from 2015 in episode 10, and then talked about 2009's Assassin's Creed 2 in episode 32. And so this is in the middle of Assassin's Creed's big run of annual releases. And how do they up the next one and the next one? It was the first Assassin's Creed game that was released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. These were at the launch of those systems in late 2013. And so it was coming off of the back of the generally seen as disappointing Assassin's Creed 3, where it was trying to get the series back in stride and kind of take a new narrative approach in the modern day setting in game as well. So Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was released on October 29th, 2013 worldwide on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, as well as in North America on Wii U. I'd totally forgotten that Wii U got this game.
Me too. Huh.
But then it was a launch title for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So in North America, that would be November 15th and 22nd, respectively, in North America. The PC version arrived in North America on November 19th, 2013. And then the game is now available on Nintendo Switch as part of Assassin's Creed The Rebel Collection, which also includes 2014's Assassin's Creed Rogue. This was released on Switch worldwide on December 6th, 2019. The game is primarily developed by Ubisoft Montreal, with additional support from their Annecy, Bucharest, Kiev, Milan, Montpellier, Singapore, and Sofia branches of Ubisoft. Published, of course, by Ubisoft. It is, like the other Assassin's Creed games, a third-person open-world action-adventure and stealth game. I mean, very much like those big Assassin's Creed games. Yeah, Assassin's Creed has had some spin-offs where it's not that, but this was the big yearly installment for Assassin's Creed. And this one was unique in the sense that it is pirate-themed. It is set in the Caribbean, and it really adds naval combat and exploration to the game. It was kind of explored that you had a boat in Assassin's Creed 3, but this one you're a pirate. I mean, your life might as well be on that ship.
Remind me if I'm incorrect, because I'm not super into the Assassin's Creed series. We talked about that in the past. I'm not plugged into it as much as you are. It was like, even though like Assassin's Creed 3, people didn't really like it, if I remember correctly, I did always hear like, but the boat stuff.
Yeah.
Boat stuff's real good.
Yeah, I don't think a game had really accomplished anything that felt that good to really feel like you were controlling a ship at sea, but it was really just exploratory ideas, like initial ideas in Assassin's Creed 3. And this is where it took off, and they really tried to do like a 60-40 split between land and sea exploration and combat, and it works super well. The story for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. In the modern day, you have the Templar-run umbrella company of Abstergo. They have established Abstergo Entertainment, which is a video game division that Abstergo oversees that uses their employees as testers to run their newly cloud-computed Animus technology. See, it used to be that you had to plug someone into a machine to access the memories of ancestors in the past using DNA. Oh, but now this is all cloud computed and can be done with any DNA sample. So the employees at this video game Abstergo Entertainment company, they are testing and exploring and diving into these deep memories of the past, and the player is tasked with looking into the memories of Edward Kenway, who is an 18th century pirate and the father of Assassin's Creed 3's Haytham Kenway. After Edward kills a rogue assassin named Duncan Walpole, he becomes an unwitting player in a Spanish and British Templar power struggle in the Caribbean to search for a special individual known as the Sage, as well as a special place called the Observatory. Edward also meets notable figures like Blackbeard and other pirates as he establishes his pirate roots even further with claiming his own ship, the Jackdaw. And these pirates want to establish their own pirate utopia, their own way of life, but also they clash with Templars along the way. Big overarching questions: who is the Sage and what is their true purpose? What is the sinister nature of the artifact hidden in the observatory? and just what is going on at Abstergo Entertainment in modern day. Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag?
I have never played it, despite people's attempts. I was telling you before the show that our friend Matt, who hosts Smash Pieces with me, I think it was at one point when I went to visit you in Michigan, and we were all there, and he was like, if I bring you my copy of Black Flag, will you play it? And I said, maybe, I don't know. And so he did. He brought me his PS4 copy of Black Flag, and I took it home with me, and then it sat on my shelf for like 3 years. Until at one point, when he came and visited me, hell, it might have been when he came to visit me when Ultimate was coming out, and realized it was just sitting there, and I hadn't played it. I was like, I'm just going to take this home. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. The other thing that I mainly remember about Assassin's Creed Black Flag is one of my favorite bug videos I've ever seen in any video, from any game that has ever been made, which is, I don't remember what the ship is called.
It's Rise of the Jackdaw, I think was the video name.
I think so too, where it's just like something goes wrong with the world geometry and the ship is like sunk deep below the ocean in like this weird chasm and is just slowly rising into the sky. It is the funniest bug video I've ever seen in my life. It is my favorite. Oh, it's so good.
I had totally forgotten about that video until you reminded me. That's fantastic.
It's so good.
I'll have to look that up later. But for me, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is the first game I played on my PlayStation 4. It's a pretty good launch title. And for me, I think I like other Assassin's Creed games better than it if I just, look back on it. But while I was researching this episode, it was just reminding me it's still a really good Assassin's Creed game. And I think it did a lot for the series in saving it from possibly a bad turn, because granted, 3 got a little weird in the storytelling, in the gameplay, in the mission structure, but the power of the PS4 could really open up that open world even more, so that you could explore the seas and go to different islands and make it almost like mature Wind Waker in a weird way, if you kind of think about it. But yeah, this really kind of course corrected the captain's steering wheel a little bit. The modern day story, it's a little weird. It's like this second of 3 big arcs that Assassin's Creed has had, and they kind of fumble around with this middle one. It's a little wonky, but I've kind of always described it as it's the best Pirates of the Caribbean game ever. And yeah, it's not associated with the franchise, the famous film and Disney ride franchise and all that, but you play like the pirate that you imagine a character like a Jack Sparrow being. And it's fantastic. Really, really great game. But I think more impressively than that is on a technical front, we're at a time here where we're a few months away from a next generation of consoles. And granted, when this generation has been built kind of like PCs, and the next generation has been continually built kind of like PCs, it's easy to do one generation to the next and backwards compatibility and things carrying forward, certainly. But this was not the case in the age of transitioning from Xbox 360 and PS3 to Xbox One and PS4. They were all totally different structures. And so to think that this game, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, was among the others at the time to release on all of these platforms and work so well with their Anvil Next engine, I think nothing short of miraculous. To have it be as good as it was, Rise of the Jackdaw aside.
I mean, to be fair, any large open world game like that is going to have bugs like that. It's unavoidable. You can't catch them all. It's just that one happens to be especially hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, but the development and getting this game out and for it to be as good as it was, I think is a real accomplishment for the end of 2013 there. Development began in mid-2011 with a different team at Ubisoft Montreal than what was working on Assassin's Creed 3. This is the first main series numbered title in Assassin's Creed to carry a subtitle. It wasn't just Assassin's Creed 4. They wanted to distinguish it from Assassin's Creed 3 with a subtitle of Black Flag to also show that the pirate theme was very different than what the rest of the franchise had attempted so far. This was also at a time where different consoles were playing different content games, so there was exclusive content on Sony platforms, which featured the protagonist of Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. That was the PlayStation Vita game that released alongside Assassin's Creed 3, with the protagonist of Aveline de Grandpré, when she was running around in New Orleans there. They had some missions with Aveline in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and 3 missions and a couple appearances there. So that PlayStation Vita sort of game content kind of continued over and away to the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 versions of Black Flag. There was apparently also a Japanese manga adaptation of Black Flag. Unfortunately, it contradicts many parts of the game's actual storyline, even though it's a manga that is meant to adapt the game. How did that happen? Who knows? But certainly not the last oddity, because PETA also complained that the game uses harpoons and depicts a glorification of whaling. Which Ubisoft says, yeah, we don't condone that today, but this is a representation of how things were in the 1700s in the Caribbean.
It's almost like they had different values 300 years ago.
Right. Also, Ubisoft did something interesting in the build-up to this game. In November 2013, Ubisoft financed the exhumation of the remains of the Spanish corsair Amaro Pargo, with the aim of reconstructing his face for a possible appearance in Black Flag, based on the time of when this was funded, presumably for downloadable content. But this ultimately did not amount to anything in-game. But still, they financed this to have it happen. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was reviewed rather well, with Metacritic averages ranging from 83 on PS4, which is, again, where I played it, to 88 on PS3. You had the open world gameplay, the side quests, the graphics, and the naval combat all being points of praise, though there were some repetitive aspects of story missions, as well as just in general, the modern day story being points of critique. I'd say basically playing the game is great, but yeah, as I said, this was kind of at a point where something big happens at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, and there's kind of some fumbling on how the modern day Assassin's Creed story should progress from there, and it kind of had the foundation here in Black Flag for that. So, opening sales of the game on the opening week were down 60% compared to Assassin's Creed 3. You could think well, did the franchise take that big of a hit after Assassin's Creed 3? Was the brand that badly damaged? Well, no, think of it this way. The game released first on October 29th, 2 to 3 weeks before next-gen consoles. So Ubisoft rightly claimed that this was due to next-gen versions being on the horizon, that many players were waiting for that next-gen version to be a launch title with those upcoming systems, with Xbox One and PS4. According to NPD Group, once the sales were all told, at the end of November 2013, it was the third best-selling game of the month, behind Call of Duty Ghosts and Battlefield 4. It ultimately shipped 11 million copies as of May 2014, and has sold 15 million copies worldwide as of 2020. The game also was noted in the awards season that year, nominated for 4 BAFTAs, including Best Game and Best Music, There were also nominations for 5 DICE Awards, including Best Game. It won Best Action Adventure Game at Spike VGX 2013. I don't know if it won any big awards per se. I don't think it was, but it was definitely in the nominations for a lot of these top awards.
It was in the nominations alongside a game very closely connected to my game.
Oh,
for a lot of these.
That's actually very interesting. I'm interested to hear what that one is. So as far as the legacy of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, you had the standalone expansion Freedom Cry, which was released in February 2014, and this starred Edward's quartermaster Adewale as the starring role, but it takes place 20 years after the Black Flag story. Assassin's Creed followed the next year, in 2014, with 2 games. There was Unity on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which fully embraced the next-gen consoles with a French Revolution setting, but then there was also Assassin's Creed Rogue on PS3 and Xbox 360, which literally copied Black Flag's mechanics to tell a story about an assassin turned Templar who is exploring the North American area during the 7 Years' War. Ubisoft decided to develop an entirely separate game based on the naval combat mechanics that were established in Black Flag, and they decided to call the game Skull and Bones. Oh yeah. Remember that title? Skull and Bones? That's because the game is in development hell currently, and is currently aiming for a March 2021 release. You remember that game, right?
I don't actually. I remember nothing about
really?
it.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
completely gone from my memory. I'm trying really hard to remember it.
Oh yeah, it was at a couple Ubisoft E3 shows for sure.
Yeah, it's not ringing any bell. What in the world?
Well, I guess they have some brand salvaging to do there. The soundtrack to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is pretty interesting because the way Assassin's Creed soundtracks went for a while was you had Jesper Kyd, who we've talked about for Assassin's Creed 2, did, 2, the original actually, as well, 2, Brotherhood, Revelations. But then for Assassin's Creed 3, they had Lorne Balfe take control of the soundtrack. And he's a notable film composer. And so this continued with another notable film composer for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This is Brian Tyler. Brian Theodore Tyler was born on May 8th, 1972 in Orange County, California. He also goes by the name of his electronic music alter ego, Mad Sonic, and that's with a K on the end. Some songs that are written and produced as Mad Sonic include Shell Shocked from the 2014 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, and Dive Bomb from Triple X The Return of Xander Cage, which features collaborations with artists like Wiz Khalifa, Kill the Noise, and Tom Morello. His grandfather was Academy Award-winning art director Walter H. Tyler, who won the Oscar for Best Art Direction for 1949's Samson and Delilah. One of his first major influences was his pianist grandmother. He also plays a lot of instruments. I saw it noted around 30 plus instruments, some of them being the piano, guitar, drums, bass, cello, world percussion, guitar viol, charango, and the bouzouki, among many others. He received his bachelor's degree from UCLA and his master's from Harvard, and he started composing for films in 1997. See, this is a composer that hasn't done so much in video games, but has an incredible film repertoire, which we will get to in our discography, so to speak, section. Because his films have grossed together over $13 billion, putting him amongst the top 10 highest-grossing film composers of all time. When asked for what pieces of music inspire him, he said the score for Vertigo by Bernard Herrmann, pretty much any Radiohead album, and probably the original Star Wars score by John Williams. He also considers conducting to be a really important part of the process. He even noted in a story, quote, "When I was recording Avengers Age of Ultron, the night before during setup at Abbey Road, I broke my foot, like I jumped and tried to do some parkour move over something and landed wrong and snapped my foot in half. And I ended up the next day with a cast on, massive painkillers, conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra at Abbey Road for Avengers. That's how much I don't want to let it go. I'll do it even when I break my leg. So he has different videos where like he's even conducting like the main theme to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Like conducting's an important part of the process to him. But also he has, I think, really good thoughts on what conducting for video games, especially with a score in general. Something we've kind of reflected over talking about other composers, but he says, quote, "With video games, you get a general idea of what the level is. And then you dive in and you play it and you live in that world. And then you write music that represents it, which is very different from sitting down and seeing a theme that is cut a certain way, like in a movie, and you're following each beat very, very specifically." So it's a lot of cues. It's a lot of atmosphere. It's a lot of getting the sense of the world because you have to have that flexibility for players going through it as opposed to the very rigid timing of film editing. You can follow Brian Tyler on Twitter at Brian Tyler Music. All right, now that discography, strap in. Here we go. The films that I noticed, and then going like in chronological order, unless it's like a film franchise he's been a part of. Here we go. Brian Tyler's composed films include Constantine, The Greatest Game Ever Played. He's done 5 of the 8 Fast and the Furious films so far, being Tokyo Drift, so number 2, Fast and Furious, number 4, Fast 5, Furious 7, Fate of the Furious, and he's also on tap to do the score for F9. Yeah. Rambo, 2008, as well as Last Blood, Eagle Eye, Dragon Ball Evolution, The Final Destination, which is number 4 in that series, as well as Final Destination 5, Law Abiding Citizen, The Expendables Trilogy, Battle Los Angeles, Iron Man 3, Thor The Dark World, and Avengers Age of Ultron out of the MCU, Now You See Me and Now You See Me 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Triple X The Return of Xander Cage, Power Rangers, The Mummy from 2017, Crazy Rich Asians, What Men Want, Ready or Not, and Charlie's Angels from 2019. So yeah, the dude does film work. But he's also done some TV with a couple episodes of Star Trek Enterprise, Hawaii Five-0, the 2010 TV series, Transformers Prime, Terra Nova, Sleepy Hollow, Scorpion, and Yellowstone. As far as those games, he scored Lego Universe, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Need for Speed, The Run, Far Cry 3, Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel, and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I saw in an interview, though, that he mentions that he's working on a game that could be released, he said, in 2021 or later, and this was a couple of years ago, so maybe he's still working on a game, but it's strange since before this, Black Flag was his last one, and that came out in 2013, but understandable, he's been very busy on the film front. Some of his other notable composing contributions, though, include the Marvel Studios logo theme since 2013's Thor The Dark World, when they actually open their Marvel Studios logo with theme music. And I think it kind of sounds like almost original Spider-Man. Like, they've since changed it, of course, ever since, I think it was Infinity War was maybe the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong. And maybe before that, Civil War maybe is when they changed it a little bit. I think it was 2016 that they tweaked it. But the very first one, like that's Brian Tyler's. He also composed the NFL on ESPN's themes since 2014. And he also rearranged Jerry Goldsmith's legendary Universal Pictures logo theme. Bum, 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 bum.
Bum, bum.
He also contributed the official tune of Formula One since March 2018. So, interesting contributions outside film, TV, and games. As far as the score to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, didn't find too much unique on it, though. There were other composers that did provide additional compositions and arrangements beyond just the release score. These were provided by Sarah Schachner, who is someone I definitely want to cover in the future on this show. Omar Fadel, Steve Davis, Mike Kramer, Jeremy Lamb, Matthew Llewellyn, and Robert Leidecker. There is also a whole section of music in this game that is the sea shanties. When you are riding your pirate ship and you're traversing across the sea and it's taking a while, sometimes your pirate crew will break out in a wide variety of sea shanties and sing these different themes, different tunes, and these are all composed by a whole separate team of like 11 composers. Then you also have Joe Henson and Alexis Smith, who composed the music for the game's multiplayer mode. Then finally, Olivier Derevier composed the score for the Freedom Cry expansion, and he has done quite a bit of work since then. Like he's primarily the Don't Nod composer, not for Life is Strange, but like he did he did Vampire. I think he also did Remember Me around that time. So like he's done definitely some video game. He may be another one we eventually talk about in the future. But Brian Tyler noted for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag that, quote, "A lot of pirate music comes from Irish jig type influences. They're essentially like folk jigs, and I thought Assassin's Creed would be something very emotional and epic in a sense, that there isn't that kind of ironic humor that Pirates of the Caribbean had." That said, he mentioned that he didn't really draw inspiration from Pirates of the Caribbean, and yet I think some tracks just happen to sound like they did, and it's kind of hard to ignore, right? We both love the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtracks, and it's like, oh, yep, it sure sounds like that, and I don't think you can avoid that when it comes to a pirate-themed game. But let's get to hearing what that music is. Let's get into the 5 critical tracks. Have to start with the Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag main theme. So this is the main menu theme for the game. And the original piece itself, it starts really slowly, but then builds to this powerful melody that you hear in the clip. Definitely is used as a leitmotif throughout most of the game. It's the main theme, after all. And yeah, I think hearing this gets you ready for that kind of pirate adventure as the world is loading and the game is ready to begin. Hearing this at Video Games Live when I went was such a delight. And it really made me realize that like Assassin's Creed has had so many wonderful soundtracks, but for this to be picked to represent that series in their selection of themes that they played that night, I think it really is one of the most underrated main themes in the series. A lot of people will pick different ones, but this is such a good one for this game. Had to be here.
I imagine, yeah, this song would be super awesome to hear a live orchestra perform. It definitely does have that sense of scale that I kind of hope a game about naval sailing would have. It is very pirate feeling. It is a very, very good main theme, and I don't think I had previously heard it before now.
Yeah, it's definitely a very piratey theme, as is the next one, number 2 on the Critical 5. The High Seas. Boy, if you don't think Pirates of the Caribbean when it comes to this one, I don't know what to tell you. This is one of the predominant naval combat themes. When you're trying to slug it out with another ship. And hurl cannonballs and mortar fire and things like that. It's definitely is nice and intense, and it gets that energy. You even hear that main theme leitmotif a little bit in there in the middle. And that atmosphere at the end of the clip with, kind of getting some of those different instruments in there. A little bit of a sense of a foreboding, like what's on the horizon. Oh, that's a really big ship. It's definitely, I think, a really, really good theme just to represent like how intense that naval combat can be and like why it was one of the reasons it was praised so much in this game.
But yeah, this is crazily Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, and I think that says more about Pirates of the Caribbean than it says about this game, because I don't think any pirate-themed game, or even like pirate-themed worlds, like I'm thinking Sly 3 and its pirate section, even all that music sounds Pirates of the Caribbean. It was that influential of a score that I don't know if it's possible to make a song in a pirate setting and not have it, just feel ever so slightly Pirates of the Caribbean. And this one, you could definitely see that, but that does not make it any less awesome. The song's great.
Yeah, you may not be cognizant of it, but I feel like you're maybe influenced by it one way or the other. But the battle is over, and you're taking a little break, and you're continuing your quest. So let's start up one of those sea shanties. Number 3 on the Critical 5. This is Leave Her, Johnny.
I thought I heard the old man say, leave her, Johnny, leave her. Tomorrow ye will get your pay, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is long and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
This sea shanty in particular is composed by Sean Dacker, Nils Brown, and Michael Schrey. So many sea shanties in this game. So difficult to pick one that I feel like represents it best. But I always have my memory drawn back to this one. And I feel like it just has really good tones about it, great harmonies, and it's a melody that you'll be humming along with them or even outside in the daily world. It's a good one. There's maybe a handful that could have gone here, certainly as far as, especially the ones that they kind of start like, all right, boys, and then they go right into it. Now this one just kind of starts out of nowhere, but this is a really good one. I always draw my memory back to this one.
I love a good sea shanty, and that's one of the main things I usually hear about Black Flag from like an environmental standpoint, an atmospheric standpoint, is that the sea shanties are very effective, and they're one of the more memorable parts of the game. I mean, sea shanties are always good. Like, I've never heard a sea shanty and not been like, nah, I can take or leave that. It's always like, oh man, I wish I could sing cool songs on a boat out in the sea. So yeah, I think that just in general, sea shanties are great, and this is a great example of one.
Could I have done Drunken Sailor? Of course I could have. But, that's like the classic. I wanted to go with something a little bit different. But you're in another battle on the seas, but you're victorious. And you have to, number 4 on the Critical 5 here, take what is ours. When you've downed a ship, you get to board the ship. You get to defeat all the crewmen and claim its resources as your own. I feel like the rhythm and the percussion here, especially like the guitar, the acoustic kind of guitar, rhythm that's going on in the background just really make this piece, and you're going to hear it a lot if you're building up the Jackdaw for all of its resources, whether it's with metal or wood or things like that. And so a lot of comments on YouTube were like, this is when like you're trying not to kill all the enemies immediately because you really like the music going on. So I feel like this is an important one for the soundtrack.
I always have a bit of a weakness for songs that employ the dun dun dun, because that's a trope. Like, that's a trope in action music for sure. And it's one that I have a particular weakness to. So, good on you, song.
Wrapping up the Critical 5, number 5 on the Critical 5 here, The Ends of the Earth. So it was interesting to note that this song apparently seemingly plays at random. Like, not at a set cutscene necessarily. People in the comments were pointing out, I had it play here, Someone had it play in the pirate base of Nassau. Sometimes someone had it play while you were taking a fort at night. But I feel like as far as like thematically, like it shows Edward's newfound dedication to a cause. Like, he was on his own trying to make it as a pirate on its own, but he found the assassins, he found his pirate crew, and he's at home. He's found a kind of family here, and it's like a new reaffirmed dedication. If you want to compare it to anything, I think if you're familiar with Brian Tyler's work in Far Cry 3, which was the previous game he did for Ubisoft, and probably why they're like, yeah, bring him back, but for Assassin's Creed. This is the most Far Cry 3-like song, I think, on the soundtrack, or at least among them. And it adds the electric guitar and, like, almost humming vocal in the background. It's just a really unique touch for a pirate soundscape, especially, like, reflecting this era, but it adds something more, something new, and it's, like, different than what you hear on most of the soundtrack.
Yeah, it sure is. I'd say. It kind of blindsided me when I heard it overall, because while this does feel very Assassin's Creed at the very least, everything before this was just like nothing like it. So it just sort of came out of nowhere where it was like, am I sure I clicked on the right link? Did I go to the wrong soundtrack? Or, I mean, it's good, but bit of a blindside on that one.
But to get a little more piratey here on the cutting room floor, here's one that's called Pirates Beware. Pirates, in this case, being spelled Pyrates. This is just another great naval combat theme, because you got to mix it up. You got to have a few different combat themes going on here. You definitely get that sense of like the Irish jig-like sort of thematic music going on here for a pirate-like song, but then like that dark accent hit comes in, and it's like, ooh, it's a little twist. Okay, I like this a lot. I was kind of struggling with this one and the High Seas, like which one should kind of go in and represent like the Pirates of the Caribbean-like song.
I think I slightly prefer this one, but only slightly.
And then the other one here on my cutting room floor is Lay Aboard, Lads. Or lay aboard lads. There isn't a comma there, but it's just a weird phrasing for a song title. This is another shipboarding theme. This one is so cool. Like, yeah, it's a great swashbuckling tune. Like, it catches your ear, and it's really enjoyable to listen to. But then the bass comes in, and it's like a distorted kind of bass too. And I feel like it's that extra layer that makes this one extra special, puts it over the top, and tough to leave it on the cutting room floor, but I wanted to put it here.
Again, though, that bass is one of those like, wasn't expecting that. But it sounds really good.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's like that, maybe like the future bit creeping in with like the Abstergo Entertainment kind of side of things coming in, like a little more futuristic sounding. Yeah, so there's all sorts of theories there. What will I never forget about Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag? Yeah, like I said, it's the best Pirates of the Caribbean game ever made. Just what you can do with building up your pirate crew and swashbuckling and exploring the Caribbean. It's not part of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, but you know, for being one of the best pirate games, and people can debate Sid Meier's Pirates. Yeah, okay, sure, fine. But for like the action and the adventure of a pirate game, this is definitely one to check out if you're a Pirates of the Caribbean fan.
One day, maybe, probably.
I know. There are a lot of Assassin's Creed games to get to, but I think this is among the better ones out there.
That's what I've been told.
So to transition to our next game, we like to highlight a fan cover, fan remix, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever it is on the internet. This one comes from Beyond the Guitar on YouTube, and he has a classical guitar cover with just one guitar covering that Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag main theme. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be right back.
So, let's turn down the adventure aspect a little bit, because Return of the Obra Dinn isn't so much about an adventure that you are on, more looking at the adventure that went remarkably poorly of somebody else. Let's talk about Return of the Obra Dinn, which was originally released on PC on October 18th, 2018, and then a console release would follow on all three major platforms, being PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, exactly 1 year later on October 18th, 2019. So that's kind of cool. Line that up. Exactly a year. It was developed by Lucas Pope and published by 3909 Games. So this is another game that was essentially made by one person.
Which is always amazing.
So, Return of the Obra Dinn is a first-person puzzle game revolving around the player having to solve various mysteries with limited information. The story is as follows. In 1803, the Obra Dinn, a ship insured by the East India Company, went missing during a voyage around the Cape of Good Hope, and years later has suddenly appeared once again. Except all of the crew and passengers appear to either be dead or missing. So, you take control of an insurance adjuster for the East India Company, who boards the Obra Dinn in order to figure out what happened to the 60 people, crew, and passengers who were on board. To assist with this task, the player is given the Memento Mortem, a pocket watch with the ability to enter the exact moment of a person's death so that they may enter the information into a logbook. From there, the player's goal is to figure out how each person on the ship died, what killed them, and when, if they died at all, entering this information into the aforementioned logbook. But you might be thinking, can't I just guess then? Do I just put every possible option in there? No, you cannot. Obra Dinn thought about this, because it only tells you if you got a fate right when you have gotten 3 of them correct. So it only ever tells you that you were right in sets of 3. So, the mystery that begins is, what misfortune befell those aboard the Obra Dinn, and what mysteries of the sea did its crew stumble upon? This is where I will ask, Peter, what are your experiences with Return of the Obra Dinn?
I played it last year, and I got it okay on my own. Like, I think I did like 21 or so out of the 60 on my own. Experienced the bad ending. And then I was like, okay, we're gonna... Well, I want to see the good ending, so you use the internet's help to fill in the rest. It's a really neat experience. I definitely recommend everyone tries it out. Not only because like you have this picture of like the faces of all the cast and crew, and then you have a list of their names, and then so you're going back in time to see the moment of each one's their death or their fate, and have to provide contextual clues. You can explore around the 3-dimensional world for a limited time to kind of gather what you can. It's a really neat game, and most importantly, a tremendously unique art style. It's a very, very cool game, and one that I think if people like puzzles or murder mysteries or things like that, gotta give it a try, and a really neat soundtrack to boot.
Yeah, 100%. I played it back in, I want to say either January or February, probably January, maybe even December, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I played it on stream, where I think we got like 25 to 30 people, somewhere in there. And then I also, the same as you, I got the bad ending, and then went and looked up the solutions. Sort of went and looked up the solutions. I tried to do it in a way that was like, all right, I have no idea where to go from now. Give me a hint to nudge me forward. But I did eventually put in all 60 fates. Did see the good ending. It is, like I said, it's a very, very unique experience. It's very neat. I do think that everybody should give it a shot. And it's on everything. Like, you can get it on everything now. So if you got a Switch, it's pretty good on the Switch, to be perfectly honest. But its development, the story behind it being made, is just really fun, including the story behind the graphics that you mentioned earlier, the art style that makes the game even more unique than it already was. So, in 2013, Lucas Pope met critical acclaim with his game, Papers, Please.
Aha, yes.
And Papers, Please was a game about working at the border checkpoint for a fascist fictional country called Arstotzka. The game reviewed and sold incredibly well due to its simple gameplay but complex and emotional plot and its morality system and all that. It was up for a bunch of awards, including, in a lot of places, Game of the Year, alongside Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag.
Hey.
So, with that success in his pocket, Pope began to work on a more experimental game, one that employed the 1-bit monochrome graphics style that was employed in early Macintosh games, but in 3D space. There is no other game that really looks like Return of the Obra Dinn. It is a monochrome sort of style that you can change the colors that it looks like by choosing what monitor you want to emulate, like old school monitor. But for the most part, it is monochrome 3D models with this thing called dithering. And dithering is usually, well, something like dithering. It's not actually dithering, because dithering applies to 2D art. It's when you see, like, in an old sprite, the, like, checkerboard pattern that makes it look like there's shading if you zoom out. That is dithering. And he made sure that he was employing that to make it really come off and pop and make sure things were legible. This presented a couple of issues. One, Pope really had a hard time figuring out how to make a scene legible from multiple angles. He fixed this by, according to him, making sure that every model was lit from the bottom, regardless of where they were standing in the world. So this apparently worked. It apparently helped. And also, he ran into an issue where players playing in windowed mode, just fine, did great. The instant the game was put in full screen, motion sickness became a problem. And he implemented a motion blur sort of thing to help fix this issue. In my opinion, it still kind of hurts to look at for long periods of time. Just a little bit. I love the way it looks, but I can only play that game for like 2.5 hours before my eyes are just like, I'm good. We're done. No more now. But Pope's original idea for the game was not actually the one we got. His original idea for the game was one where the player didn't investigate the deaths of others, but instead one where the player died over and over again themselves, and then they would be shown their death, and then be sent back 1 minute in order to manipulate the environment in a way that would recreate said death. I don't know how that would have actually been laid out. I don't know how that would have been organized, but that's what he says the original thought was. But he also says that this kind of turned out to be a concept that was too difficult for him to implement very well. So while trying to think about what he could do differently, he came to the idea of what if you used snapshots of the moment of somebody's death as a way to tell an overall story. And of course, that's where the main draw, the main hook of Obra Dinn came into form. So from there, he started working on the narrative, which he claims was the longest part of development. He had initially teased the game in 2014 because he planned for it to be out by 2015. Obviously, this did not happen. The game would turn out to take 4 years to produce instead of the 1 he had estimated. And in 2016, he showed up to GDC with a limited demo that featured 6 fates that players could figure out, and feedback was largely positive. So he started expanding the game's scope and expanding the game's narrative from there. He even says that he had a spreadsheet of each fate so that he could make sure that each one could be logically followed to their actual conclusion by, somebody that didn't have all the information and stuff like that. And with the story completely figured out, he created another demo and took it to PAX Australia in 2016. And this demo featured not only the 6 fates from the original demo, it also featured 13 new fates that had been not in the first demo, and changed how they were presented in that they were presented out of chronological order to the player, much like they are in Obra Dinn. You don't see things in the order that they actually occurred, for the most part. But this actually caused confusion in players, and they were unable to follow the timetables in which the game's story was being laid out. So to combat this issue, Pope implemented the logbook and split each, quote, cause of death. So basically each chapter, it was split into 10 sections or 10 chapters, the whole story, so that it was a little bit easier to give context to everything and just keep track of the timeline a lot more easily, even if it was being presented out of chronological order. And upon its release, Pope said that he was not actually worried about the game performing well, because he was still earning enough money off the success of Papers, Please that Obra Dinn could have failed completely and he would have been fine. This was 5 years later.
Wow, that's remarkable for an indie. But then again, if it's one person, he doesn't have to worry about splitting the money up. So yeah,
that's true. Even then, he wouldn't have to worry anyways, because the game reviewed and sold very well. It currently sits at a Metacritic score of 89 for the PC version. And it was referred to by several publications in 2018 as one of the best games of the year. I think Polygon straight up said it was the best game of the year. A lot of sites at least had it in the running for Game of the Year. I know Polygon really, really enjoyed it a lot. It was nominated for and won several industry awards. It won Best Art Direction at the Game Awards, Best Indie Game at the Titanium Awards, which I'm not familiar with. the Seamus McNally Grand Prize and Excellence in Narrative at the Independent Games Festival. It should be noted that this was actually the second time Pope had won the McNally Grand Prize, because Papers, Please also won it.
Mm-hmm.
It won Best in Narrative at GDC, and also won the awards for Artistic Achievement and Game Design at the BAFTAs. It was also nominated for 6 DICE Awards, though it did not win any of them, and was nominated for 2 awards at South by Southwest. So it was highly critically acclaimed. So, I have mentioned his name multiple times now. The developer, Lucas Pope, also happens to be the one behind the soundtrack, so let's go ahead and talk about him for just a second. He was either born in either 1977 or 78. Apparently, it's unclear. That's the first time that specific thing has happened. Usually it's just they don't have a birth date at all, or they do and we know where they were born and when and everything. I've never had it be like, it's probably one of these 2 years, somewhere in there.
We had Akihiko Narita last week for Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Was like a few years apart. The internet doesn't know. I don't know.
He grew up in Virginia, though, that we do know. His father was a handyman, which meant that growing up he had plenty of spare parts surrounding him with which he could tinker, and that led him to gain a large interest in mechanical engineering, and by the time he hit high school, that interest had specifically evolved into an interest in robotics. And that interest continued until he entered the mechanical engineering program at Virginia Tech and realized that the actual field as it existed wasn't actually what he wanted to do. Did not have as much interest in it as he thought he did, but it did lead him to realize that he did have a massive interest in one aspect of mechanical engineering, and that was computer programming. So during this time, he also happened to get involved with the Quake community and began assisting with the development of various Quake mods, including, and I found this weird, an officially sanctioned Quake mod paid for by Sony Pictures to promote the film Anaconda. Sure. After a while, Pope and his friends formed their own studio called Ratloop, who developed and released a full conversion mod of Quake called Malice in 1997, but found that they had a lot of issues getting distributors to actually stock the game, and so Malice was a flop. Their next game was Gearhead Garage in 1999, which was a car repair game that was actually successful enough that Activision actually stepped in and provided distribution assistance so they didn't run into the same issues as they did with Malice. And Activision also just gave them a bunch of cash and said, yeah, make some experimental games. And Pope found himself incredibly interested by this idea. But when none of those experimental games actually shipped into the world, Ratloop became a dormant studio in 2003, with Pope leaving the studio to join Real Time Associates, where he developed a game called Remission, which is a shooter meant to encourage child cancer patients to take their chemo medication. It was also here that he met his wife, Keiko Ishizaka. In 2007, he left Real Time Associates and moved to Santa Monica, where his wife joined 2K Games, and he joined Naughty Dog as a tools programmer in the middle of development on Uncharted Drake's Fortune. He also stuck around afterwards for the development of Uncharted 2, but when the team was ready to go straight into the development of Uncharted 3, Pope found himself longing to go back to the world of experimental games. So he and his wife spent 2 weeks after the release of Uncharted 2 developing a game called Mightier, which they submitted to the IGF, and Valve took an interest in that game and inquired about making it a free title on Steam, which they both accepted.
IGF Indie Games?
The Indie Games Festival.
Yeah, Independent Games Festival, yeah. Mm-hmm.
From there, Pope left his position at Naughty Dog and the couple moved to Saitama, Japan, where Pope began fully dedicating his time to experimental game development. And over the next few years, he and his wife would develop several smaller games. One of them apparently required him to live in Singapore for a year while taking frequent trips to the United States. And it was through this experience, mainly the multiple trips through customs, that Pope came up with the concept for Papers, Please. And then that game released, and it was super successful. And from there, he made Obra Dinn, and the rest is history. From here, Pope says that he wants to keep developing games, but he wants to keep them at a small scale. He says that Obra Dinn was never actually meant to be as big as it was. The scope kind of got away from him on this one. And he's hoping that for his next project, he will be able to rein in the scope of the whole thing and just keep it on the smaller side this time. Maybe it'll actually only take him a couple of years instead of 4. For his discography, he has only done the music for Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn, as far as I'm aware. He does not consider himself a musician. He just believes that he made some music, and he doesn't consider it all that impressive for both Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn. And so Obra Dinn has never gotten like an official release. It's on YouTube, like from Lucas Pope himself, but there's no place you can go buy it. You can't buy it on Bandcamp. It's not on Spotify. You can't do anything like that with it. So for development research on the soundtrack of Obra Dinn, one of Pope's main worries for the game was to make sure it didn't feel too much like he was fishing for nostalgia, despite the retro art style. In fact, he talks about how at one point during development, he was considering a CRT effect to go over everything. And then he kind of decided, all right, that might be one step too far.
Yeah, that'd be a bit much.
That would be too sort of digging into the nostalgia aspect for him. And so he scrapped that aspect. For this reason, instead of the 8-bit music that Papers, Please employed, and like you'd probably expect from the art style of Obra Dinn, he decided he was going to go with a 19th century style orchestral soundtrack. He said, quote, "Several people have asked me that, why I decided to go with strings instead of chiptunes. For one thing, I wanted the game to have full voiceovers for the sake of the puzzles. So I felt that would clash with chiptunes. Plus, for me, the Mac Plus had an 8-bit DAC. I don't know what that means.
Digital audio controller, I think.
Ah, so that would do it. So when I think old computer, I think samples. I never wanted the old computer shit to override the old ship shit, basically. Which, I mean, that makes sense. I think this soundtrack as it exists works way better than an 8-bit soundtrack ever would have. I can't imagine this game with an 8-bit soundtrack, so I think that was the correct decision.
Yeah, and he's totally right about the voiceovers too. Like, before you get into that freeze frame that you get to explore for about 30 seconds or so, you hear the moments leading up to that freeze frame, but yeah, all voice acted with environmental sounds and whatnot. And yeah, if you did that and then suddenly went boom, bam, boom, bam, boom, bam, boom, bam, and like with the chip tune, like it'd be too weird. I totally agree. This is the right choice.
Mm-hmm. So let's hear what that music sounds like. And full disclosure, the soundtrack's not as exciting as Black Flag. Gotta be real with you up front, right there. I like it, but it sure isn't gonna have the same punch.
I mean, it's film composer versus a guy doing this on his own.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the difference is vast, and yet I still enjoy the soundtrack a lot. So let's start with critical track number 1, Theme. I think overall, this is probably the most recognizable non-jingle song in the game. It plays on the title screen for the Obra Dinn, which is a very nice-looking title screen that is just the boat from afar, the ship from afar. Sorry, it's a ship, not a boat. It's a big ship.
I'm sure we've made that mistake a couple times already. People are yelling at us.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And just the sea and the title, and it's just a really nice-looking title screen. And this song, it's a ship song. It feels shippy. All right, look, I don't know how to put it, But I think this definitely puts you in a bit of a sailing mood, despite the fact that no sailing is done in the entirety of Return of the Obra Dinn, but you're on a ship, so it's close enough. And I also just really like the use of bells. I think it adds to the piece super well, and we'll talk about that with another piece later on down the list. It's just a really cool it's a really cool piece, I think.
I like the cello driving the melody. It's definitely one that you hear and it's like, yeah, this is the main theme. This is Obra Dinn for sure. This is kind of what you should expect for the sound.
Yeah. But then you'll also hear stuff like critical track number 2, Loose Cargo. So look, bad luck on the Obra Dinn started really early. Like, almost immediately, within a day of the ship leaving port. People getting crushed by barrels. People getting crushed in barrels. And again, this was the first few days of the voyage. I like this song because I'm always down for more harpsichords. I do think that I think it's supposed to be a violin. I'm not sure what that MIDI's supposed to be.
Oboe-like? I don't know.
It might be an oboe. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a woodwind of some kind. I think it works really well, just in general, but it's all about the harpsichord for me, man. And I also I think this song feels a lot more laid back than other songs on the soundtrack. Because it's like, yeah, people are still dead, but man, people get crushed by barrels all the time in this line of work. What's it matter? Like, I mean, it's not as weird as some of the things that will later happen to the ship. So, in a way, I think this song kind of reflects that of like, man, this is just another Tuesday.
Yeah, I think you gotta start somewhere. If you're gonna build to somewhere, you gotta start somewhere. And I think that's where this is.
Yeah. Critical track number 3 gets a little bit more dire. Murder. Okay, so legit, I actually meant to go check if this actually plays in the scene. I think it does. I'm pretty sure it does. This is one of the coolest parts of the game. So like you mentioned way back, one of the things you have to help you work through the identities of the various passengers of the ship is a drawing, like a large portrait of everybody that was on board the Obra Dinn, and it happens to be a portrait of somebody being executed for murder. So it should come as no surprise that at a certain point, you end up in that scene, and it just drives the whole thing home. And also the way you have to figure out who killed that person, because that's the point of a firing line. You're not supposed to know. So that nobody feels guilty for murdering this man, or they shoulder all the guilt. I don't know what the actual logic was. I know it was something like that. And so when I think of the song, I think of that scene because it's so cool. And you gotta like trace the bullet trail to see which one actually hit. It's so cool. I also think that this song really drives home the military aspect of being a sailor on the Obra Dinn, because while I don't think it was not a military ship, obviously it was a trade ship. It's still like serving on a ship back then. Even if you weren't in the military, you were basically in the military. And I think it's the snare for the most part that really drives that feeling of the military home. It's a good song.
It does feel a little March-like. Yeah, I agree with that. And even there's the murder near the beginning of the game where you're like, you're learning the basics of how that goes in, like, one of the important main bases of the ship, I suppose. We might as well say in, like, the captain quarters murder.
Yeah.
Like that's like where you're learning how the foundations of the game work. It kind of reminds me of that as well. It's good music, and I think it's one of the ones where it's like when it's paused and like this is the music when like you're exploring. This is definitely another one like oh yeah, I remember hearing this one, really liking it a lot. I'm glad you put it here in the Critical 5.
It's good. Critical track number 4 is The Calling. Suddenly you find yourself at a death that didn't take place on the Obra Dinn? What? Hold on, what? Wait, what are those things? Obviously before this, supernatural factors had already shown up. Spoilers, there are supernatural factors in this game, and they're really cool, like great monster designs in this game.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first and I think the only time where it's just like, oh yeah, this death did not happen on the ship. You're out at sea in like some lifeboats.
Yep.
And all of these people are super screwed. And so this is the first time at the very least that you start to see some hints of like, oh, that's why the Obra Dinn was doomed. They kind of messed with some stuff they shouldn't have. And I think to reflect that, this song feels very mysterious. The thing that gets me about this song is, in my opinion, it's not really sinister. Because, and I may be way off base here, I don't think the song is trying to, like, show the supernatural beings as being the villains. Because those sailors stole from them. They're the bad guys. They deserve this. And so I think this song does a very good job at sort of reflecting that. The sea is powerful. It is not the villain in this story. The sailors who stole from it are, and they are getting what they deserve.
But I feel like what the song does accomplish, the rhythm feels off-kilter enough to make you feel uneasy. That like, yeah, you're exploring a whole different territory here, but if it's bam, 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 like it just makes you feel unsteady.
Yeah, it's very, very good. It's a really good scene. One that stumped me entirely for pretty much the whole game. But yeah, it's a very memorable part of the game and a great song to go alongside it. And of course, critical track number 5 is Soldiers of the Sea. Judging by YouTube comments, this is the most popular song in the game, but that doesn't make my comment about the theme wrong because a lot of the song is just the main leitmotif from the main theme, you know, the one with bells that I said was really cool. And this one does it with even more bells, and I really enjoy the melody of this song a lot. It's not the song that plays the first time you see something supernatural, but it is the song that plays when you see something supernatural that you probably didn't expect. Because the first time it's something that like, oh yeah, I'm playing a boat game. Of course this thing's going to show up. If you know what I mean, which we'll get to on the cutting room floor. But this one is just like, hey, what are those things?
Yeah, the YouTube commenters are not wrong. It's this song that I hear and it's like, oh yeah. Yeah, I have definitely good memories. Like, it makes me think back to my time with Obra Dinn. You're right. The bells. Like it's a whole experience when you're trying to piece things together and you're exploring the tiniest details in a scene. This really brings me back, this song in particular.
Yeah, and I think the like dun 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 dun, that's my favorite leitmotif in the game. I love it. It's so catchy. So for tracks on the cutting room floor, you got a couple of how would you say, unconventional ones for usual, but also 100% yes, they should be there. So hit me with them.
Yeah, so like these are on the soundtrack and they define the experience of playing the game, but I don't think there were ones that like Lucas Pope put out. In fact, it was like a different rip altogether. I think people going into the files themselves. And so not necessarily official titles here, but like if you've played the game, you know, these have to be here. One of them is called Dun Dun.
It's the song that plays at the beginning of every episode of Law and Order.
Dun dun. Yeah, but yeah, this is it. Like that's the piece. 5 seconds. That's it. This is every time you activate the Memento Mortem to investigate the murder scene. This plays, and sometimes there's like a faster version, but just this little jingle. Like this is Obra Dinn to a T. Has to be here.
It's a very, very good little jingle. And honestly, even if it was on the soundtrack, I don't think I would have, like the official soundtrack, I don't think I would have put it on the Critical 5 because it is 5 seconds long. But I 100% agree it has to be mentioned in some capacity because it's one you hear a lot.
Oh yeah, it would not go on a Critical 5, but I'm happy to point it out here in the side part of Cutting Room Floor. The other one that I'd like to mention, because it's also important in the same kind of way, is Book Reveal. So congratulations! You got a set of 3 fates correct. And this music plays when the game is telling you which 3 you've done so successfully. And what better melodic technique for the soundtrack to use when you're talking about highlighting a set of 3 than triplets. The triplet. Yes. Lucas Pope may not consider himself a musician, but I think that choice is genius.
So like legit, that never even crossed my mind until you brought it up. And yeah, that's absolute genius. That's so good. Kudos on that. Jeez. For me, I got 2 full songs that I figured belonged on the cutting room floor. The first one is Unholy Captives. I mostly wanted to highlight this song because it's weird. Like, the song sounds kind of goofy. And for some reason, the main thing that I always think of when I think of this song is one of the fates that is, I think it's the chef, but I could be wrong, who, the way he died was just getting hit so hard with something's tail that he died. And that's it. That's his whole fate. He just like looked at something and went, man, that looks good. And then got slapped and is gone. Immediately dead. I don't know why Pope decided to go for a circus sounding piece here, but I still kind of like it. I don't know.
That's definitely what you achieve with an oompa, oompa kind of sounding organ, yeah.
I just can't not think of that as like, it sounds like something that would play at a circus. That is the atmosphere that puts out. I don't know. But the other song on the cutting room floor, that I think is the one I like even more than that is The Doom. When I said, like, yeah, the Soldiers of the Sea were not the first time that you realized that something supernatural happened to the Obra Dinn, this is the first time you would have realized it, but I also said, like, the first thing you see is not something that would be super surprising, because a Kraken showed up. Just suddenly a Kraken. And, like, yeah, when you're playing as an insurance adjuster for the East India Company, the first thing you think isn't, I wonder when the Kraken's gonna show up. But are you really that surprised when the Kraken shows up? And I just really like this song because it's very ominous, and it does have this sort of feeling of, oh, okay then, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's a simplicity to it, where it's just, you know, a set of 4 notes that just then builds on the next subsequent 4, and then keeps going. Like, yeah, the Doom is absolutely right.
Oh yeah, very much so. So, what will I never forget about Return of the Obra Dinn? I think it's one of the most unique puzzle games I've ever played. I am very glad that I got to experience and went through it, and I would very much, like you said, I would definitely recommend anybody that has any interest in mystery solving games, you should play Return of the Obra Dinn. It's very good. But also, the bad ending is one of the funniest bad endings I've ever seen in my life.
And at least you can, it just takes you right back there. So, like, please experience the bad ending. It'll take you right back to the choice. It's fine.
It's so dumb. I adore the bad ending of this game because it's like, yeah, idiot. You did so bad that this happened. It's so good. But yeah, play the game. It's great.
I was on the fence for a long time about playing this game because I hadn't played Papers, Please. I have it in my Steam library, still haven't gotten around to it. But I did play it, and I feel like I played it one sitting. I was hooked. It doesn't take that long. It's maybe like a 4-hour tops kind of game, so I don't feel like you're going to be, you know, too enraptured for a long time. Depends how much time you actually want to, like, how much effort you want to give for, like, your first pass through. But yeah, no, Obra Dinn is great. It's so unique in so many ways, and I'm glad we got to bring it up on this show.
Yeah.
But yeah, ships.
Boats.
Adventures at sea. Boats. No. No, like, I'm really glad that we had to have this kind of theming, because it's just like, yeah, when you mention we're doing Obra Dinn this week, I'm like, I know what to put with it.
Yeah, you were really excited too. You like messaged me like, I found the untouchable pairing there.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun, and I feel like it made for a really good episode. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at the Dobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's also where you can find Joe's other podcasts, Masterpieces. You can find that MP3 podcast version, podcast services around the globe, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, even on Spotify, where we not only have the podcast feed, but also our big Spotify playlist, where if we mention a song from a video game on this show, if it's on Spotify, it's going on the Spotify playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
Black Flag is on Spotify. Unfortunately, like I said, Obra Dinn has never gotten like an official release outside of Lucas Pope putting them on YouTube. So it's not on Spotify, so sadly that won't be on there. And unfortunately, I actually learned today that some albums that were on Spotify have been removed. Florence is no longer on there, which is a big disappointment for me. Hopefully it gets put back on at some point. But yeah, unfortunate. But yeah, Black Flag, that's getting added.
All right, something better than nothing at least. And then we're going to work on some bonus tracks here in the background there when we can. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Oh, I'm so crazy excited for next week because I think this pair of games is going to be so much fun to talk about. I will be talking about Ryo Kinugasa.
It is another delicious pairing that I think you had it. I'm like, nope, this has got to go with it.
I saw the game you put down there. I was like, yes! Why didn't I think of that?
I will be talking about Tomoya Otani. Delicious indeed. Well, let's play us out, Joe.
So, it was actually not super easy to find a remix of this soundtrack. Again, I assume because it doesn't really have an official release. But you know what fits really well when talking about C games? The accordion.
Yeah.
Why? I don't actually know. But it has that feeling to it. So I managed to find an accordion cover of the main theme of Return of the Obra Dinn done by Jackson Parodi. So please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.